maybe a word about what is the aim of Ethiopia. When I met the Ethiopian leadership in February, they really used this kind of language that they are going to destroy the Tigrayans, they are going to wipe out the Tigrayans for 100 years and so forth, which for me referred to very serious human rights atrocities and crimes as well. If you wipe out your national minority, what is it? You cannot destroy all the people, you cannot destroy all the population in Tigray, and I think that's very obvious that we have to react and because it looks for us like ethnic cleansing. It is a very, very serious act if this is true.
The part of the video I'm not looking forward to. Luther and the Jews. And to be honest, it's tough to know where to begin. Essentially, in medieval Europe, Jews were the only group who weren't in any way Christian. There were no public atheists or anything, and Muslims were only in the south of Spain. So Jewish people were aliens straight away. They lived in separated communities, they went to synagogue rather than to church, and on top of that, they were blamed for the death of Jesus 1500 years earlier. Essentially, they were second-class citizens and they were disliked by all of Europe. And Luther actually began by defending the Jews. In 1524, he wrote an essay called That Jesus Christ Was Born a Jew, where he criticized the church for treating Jews poorly and made the argument, well, why would anyone want to convert to Christianity if this is the example we're giving and if this is the way we're treating Jewish people? However, Luther was so convinced that he was a prophet living at the end times that he assumed his writings and his teachings would just make Jews convert. And as he grew older, this simply didn't happen. Not many Jews became Christians in the early 1500s. And so Luther began to write more angrily against the Jews. Now, although this doesn't excuse anything he wrote, it is important to remember that Luther was living with all sorts of physical ailments as he got older. He had hearing, vision, balance issues, he had kidney stones, arthritis, and crippling chest pain. I imagine if that happened to me, I'd also be a cranky old man. It's also important to mention that political correctness wasn't really a thing in the 1500s. No one cared about being particularly sensitive back then. But being a cranky old man in a non-PC era does not excuse what he said. In 1543, he published a 65,000-word book against the Jews in which he called for synagogues to be burned down, houses to be confiscated, and he went as far as to say that we are not at fault in slaying them. Now, yes, Luther always wrote in over-the-top language, but make no mistakes, this was something else. And this book that Luther wrote at the end of his life suffered a bad legacy. The Nazis particularly loved this book and they held it up at their Nuremberg rallies. In 1938, they took the book literally and burned down many Jewish synagogues on the Night of Broken Glass, also known as Kristallnacht. Now, the final solution definitely would have happened had Luther not existed. Make no mistake, Luther did not cause the final solution. But what he did do was he gave legitimacy to their claim that the Nazis were acting in the German Christian tradition.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time, he wanted to expel the Jews.
Führer empfing den Großmufti von Jerusalem, einen der einflussreichsten Männer des arabischen Nationalismus. Der Großmufti ist das religiöse Oberhaupt der Araber in Palästina und gleichzeitig deren oberster Richter und Finanzverwalter. Wegen seiner nationalen Haltung verfolgten ihn die Engländer erbittert und setzten auf seinen Kopf einen Preis von 25.000 Pfund aus. Auf abenteuerlichen Wegen gelangt er über Italien nach Deutschland.
The deal was pretty clear. While the Nazis stopped short of actually recognizing an independent Palestine, Hitler was planning to deal with the Jews who'd settled in the country. And so began the Mufti's 4-year-long relationship with the Nazis. Throughout his time in Germany during the Second World War, al-Husseini appeared to enjoy a close working relationship with some of the highest-ranking Nazis. In the Grand Mufti's memoirs, published in 1999, he freely discusses his close relationship with SS Chief Heinrich Himmler, the man who was the architect of the extermination of the Jews.
In your film, you compare the Quran with Mein Kampf. Why did you feel the need to do that?
Yes, in my speech for the House of Lords today, I quoted Winston Churchill, who also, in a book for which he got the Nobel Prize of Literature, made this comparison in the 50s here in the United Kingdom. And I said that I believe that Winston Churchill was spot on. I believe that the Islam is not so much a religion, but more an ideology. It wants to rule and dominate not only all aspects of one's life, but a whole society. Therefore, it shouldn't be compared to other religions like Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, but it should be compared with other totalitarian ideologies like communism or fascism. And I believe the symbol of fascism, Mein Kampf, can be compared with the symbol of the other totalitarian ideology, Islam, which is called the Quran. There is no room for anything else. If you are kuffar, if you are not a Muslim, if you are a Jew or a Christian, if you are a renegade or an apostate, well, you face severe punishment, if not death, according to this ideology, this totalitarian ideology called Islam. You can all read that in the Quran. This is why I made this comparison.
And you're calling for the Quran to be banned. Does that not go against the sort of European ideology of free speech?
Well, normally it would, yes, but I said it in the Dutch context, and you have to understand the Dutch context. In the Netherlands, a few decades ago, Mein Kampf was outlawed. And at that time, the leftish and the liberals politicians in Holland applauded it. Nobody stood up and said, hey, our freedom of speech, we should not ban a book. So in the Dutch parliament 2 years ago, I said to the left, well, if you are consistent, you applauded the banning of this book. I'm not in favor of banning any books normally, but if you are consistent, there is another book that is also full of incitement of violence. So if you are consistent, you should now also advocate the outlawing of the Quran. Of course, they didn't. They shouted that I was an idiot. And they said, well, Mein Kampf, okay, that should be outlawed, but the Quran should not. So I tried to expose, and I think I was successful, that they were very inconsistent.
And the House prayer group in the House of Representatives, that what we ought to do is follow the recommendation of Eisenhower. We're talking about former General Eisenhower. It was President Eisenhower. He was a great president of the United States. And this was right after World War II. He said, and this is a quote, I'm quoting Eisenhower now. He said, the problems of this world are so great that we will never resolve the problems until we learn to sit down and pray together. And so we decided, let's all get the governors, the prime minister, and the members of the House, and the members of the Senate, and the rest all together, and we will pray with them. We did this. In fact, we had 5 senators with me at that time, and we went over. The problem was only 2 of the governors showed up out of 9, so it didn't work. 8 months later, we had occasion to be back there, and we put together the same thing. But we talked to them to let them know. We talked to the governors at that time, and the 9 governors that were in Ethiopia. And so we got them and explaining what it was all about, and the governors who had been fighting with each other and had been fighting with Haile Mariam, they all prayed together, and we joined in prayer by 18 members of the United States House of Representatives. We were joined with them by phone, and the Prime Minister and all of us, members of the Senate, and others who were there, we all rejoiced and embraced each other, and that's really significant. The 9 governors had never been together before. They didn't like each other. They'd never been in the same room before. Well, most of the people didn't live in cities, and that made this effort that much more difficult. The vast majority of people who live there are in rural communities, and that made this widespread change and development a longer and more difficult path. In Ethiopia, the tribal factions also played a great role. If you go from province to province, that used to be from tribe to tribe. And they historically have not gotten along until this time. So it made it more difficult because of the factions and all of that, but it worked. We unified them together, and that was unlike anything that has ever happened. One of the governors who was there at the time was named Dr. Abiy. You might remember that name because he's now the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And I've often said that Dr. Abiy is arguably the most educated, the smartest guy that I've seen in that position in the entire continent of Africa. He was just a tremendous person. Well, we got them together, and at a leader's breakfast, we put something together where he told the story of his journey and faith in Jesus.
አንድ ሼክ ነኝ የሚል አካል 1 ሚሊዮን ቢሞት 119 ነኝ አለ። የሙስሊም ሼክ ይመስለኛል። ኡስታዝ ነው አዶን ነው ምን እንደሆነ አላቅም። ግን አንድ ደንቆሮ ነው። ደንቆርናውን የምታዩት 1 ሚሊዮን ሰው ቢሞት 119 ሚሊዮን ይቀራል የሚል ደንቆሮ ነው። አንድ ደንቆሮ 1 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ለሱ ልክ 1 ሚሊዮን ጉንዳል አደረገው። የአማራ ክልል ሙስሊሞች ድምጽ ይላል። ፋኖ ሆይ ይህ የእርዳታ ምግብ በቀጥታም ይሁን በተዘዋዋሪ አንተን ጠላቴ ብሎ ሊያጠፋ በተነሳው ጠላት እጅ እንደሚገባ ለአፍታም ቢሆን መጠራጠር የለብህም። የሁሉ የእርዳታ ምግብ በክልላችን አድርጎ ነው ከዋት እጅ የሚገባውና ሳታመነታና የማንም ተጽዕኖ ሳይበግር መውሰድ ያለብህ። ማን ነው ቴሮሪስት? ማን? እነዚህ ሰዎች ይሄንን ግለሰብ እነዚህ ግለሰቦች በስማቸው ጠርተን አመራሩን ቢሆን የሚዲያ አካላት ቢሆን ግለሰቦች ቢሆን እየዘሩት ያለው ዘር መጥፎ እንደሆነ ሰው አያውቅም። ለምሳሌ አንድ የትግራይ ተወላጅ ይሄን ብሎ ቢሆን ኖሮ በ1000 የሶሻል ሚዲያቸው ላይ ያጮሁት ነበር። ግን ከትግራይ ህዝብ የምንማረው ስነ ስርዓት፣ ከትግራይ ህዝብ የምንማረው ጨዋነት፣ ከትግራይ ህዝብ የምንማረው ዲሲፕሊን አለ። የትግራይ ህዝብ ለማንም አካል እህል አያልፍም ብሎ መንገድ ዘግቶ አያውቅም። የትግራይ ህዝብ የዚህ ዘር ነው ብሎ አፈናቅሎ አያውቅም። የትግራይ ህዝብ ይሄ ዘር መጥፋት አለበት ብሎ ጦርነት ከፍቶ አያውቅም። ይሄንን ጨዋ ህዝብ ያለ ስሙ እየሰጠን፣ ይሄንን ስርዓት ያለው ህዝብ ያለ ስሙ እየሰጠን የራሳችንን ያበየን ወደምዬ አይነት እየተደረገ የሚጭበረበር ብዙ ነገር ስላለ የሚሰራ ብዙ ወንጀል ስላለ እኔ ህሊና እንዳለው ሰው ፈጣሪ እንዳለው ሰው ለኡነት ምስክር መሆን መቻል አለብኝ። የአማራ ክልል አመራሮች፣ የአማራ ሶሻል ሚዲያ አክቲቪስቶች፣ ፖለቲከኞች፣ አንዳንድ ደግሞ ሁሉም ባይሆኑ ምሁራኖች እነሱ ናቸው በትግራይ ህዝብ ላይ አሸባሪ እነሱ ናቸው።
ይሄው ጥቅም ሲሸጥ والله ይሄው ጥቅም ሲሸጥ والله ይሄው ጥቅም ሲሸጥ ወላሂ 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 ወላሂ
ትግራይ ያለው አዲስ አበባ በቢላ ልታድሩ ነው የምፈልገው የኔ ልጆች የጠፉት በትግራይ አይደለም እንዴ እናንተ እንዳትጠፉት መተነኛ ተከላክለና እናንተ ደግሞ ትግራይ ያለው አዲስ አበባ ውስጥ በቢላ ልታድሩ ነው የምፈልገው በቢላ ልትደበድቡት ነው የምፈልገው
ስለዚህ የትግራይ ኮሚኒቲ ስዊዘርላንድ ነው ምትኖረው ይባላል ጄኔቭ ነው ምትኖረው ይባላል ሚዲያ ላይ ኦሬዲ ወጣ ነገር ነው ቪዲዮ በእጃችን አለ ቪዲዮ በእናንተ እጅ አለ ቀጥታ ፍርድ ቤት ኮርት ይዘ ኦፕን አድርገ ይዘ ማቅረብ ነው እቺ ቴሮሪስት ነች እቺ ቴሮሪስት ናት ስሟ ኑራ አሊ ነው የምትባለው የሚል ደርሶኛል